To get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tricia Shimamura, and I am the Director of Community Affairs for the Manhattan Borough President's Office. If I'm sure you probably heard this from Porfirio already from our team, but I hope that you found us because you're interested in learning more about our city's budget process. If not, then I have some bad news for you. But otherwise, I hope that you're here and that you learned about us through some of our outreach regarding the community leadership training series. A little bit about this really quick. One of the responsibilities of the Manhattan Borough President's Office includes providing technical support and assistance to community boards, and we take that to heart here. We designed for the second year in a row not just one standoff training, but a whole series of them that were really designed not just for community board members but for anybody, any Manhattanite, any nonprofit organization or tenants association, block group, block association, or otherwise that is interested in building their civic engagement skills, building some soft leadership skills so that you can effectively do your jobs and serve your communities better. And so that's kind of where we designed this idea of a whole series of trainings. We held some really awesome ones thus far on conflicts of interest, which I know sounds really boring, but was excellent. Also one on parliamentary procedure. We're going to be doing a number of these, including a de-escalation training, because we know that because it can get a little heated sometimes when working with community members, and a number of other similar trainings. We hope that you will not only stick it out today with us for this great session going from around 12 to 1, but also come back this evening for another training from 5:30 to 6:30. I will make a special plug for our Friday event, which is in person instead of on Zoom. It's going to be an emergency preparedness training in partnership with New York State Emergency Management and John Jay College. You have to RSVP before for that one, just because you will get a walk away with a fully stocked go bag, perfect to keep in your hall closet or keep underneath your bed, just ready for any emergency, with a first aid kit and a bunch of other good stuff in there. So I hope that we not only see you later on this week for additional Zooms, but also on Friday, the 17th at 12 o'clock at John Jay College for this emergency preparedness training. I also want to just give a huge shout out to Porfirio Figueroa, John Billings, Eric Cuello, the rest of my team at Community Affairs. If you belong to a community board, if you are out in any sort of community engagement activities, I guarantee you probably see them around, and they put together this really thoughtful list of events. And so I want to give them a huge shout out. I finally just also want to say a special thank you to Amy Slattery, my colleague, who's the director of budget in our office. You're going to hear from her in just a minute. But Amy runs, oversees, oh, Porfirio, you're on mute, or you're not muted. Amy oversees the budget department here, and her team has been working very long hours every day trying to make sure that the monies that we do receive through the office get distributed to really amazing, worthwhile causes. This training really falls into the category of where information we know makes you a stronger advocate, and it makes you a stronger board member. It makes you allows you to better understand where are the opportunities that you can advocate for funds, where are the opportunities when you hear about budget cuts, what that actually means and what that can translate to for your community. When it comes to building district needs statements, doing needs assessments for your neighborhoods, this can really make a difference. And so I really want to thank Amy and the Independent Budget Office for being here today and giving us this training. As you can probably tell, I've got a little bit of laryngitis, so I'm going to stop talking and we'll be off screen, but I'm going to ask Porfirio to put his contact information into the chat so that everybody can have it. If you have any questions that aren't answered today, feel free to reach out to Porfirio. We're happy to try to get those answers for you. If questions come up throughout the presentation, the best thing to do is to use that Q&A feature, which is the button at the bottom of your screen, in order to ask your question, and then questions can be answered at the end. Finally, I just want to say that if you look at the top left-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see a recording sign. And that's a good thing. We're recording all these trainings. We know that they're only going to be about an hour. We know that things happen kids are at home sick, work happens, all these things happen. So we hope that you stay here for the entire time. But if you have to leave early, don't worry. All of these trainings are going to be recorded and posted to our YouTube page, to the Borough President's Office, so you can also catch up there. With that, I'm going to say thank you for being here. I hope to see you this evening or throughout the rest of the week for our webinar trainings. And then I will hopefully definitely see a lot of you on the 17th at 12 o'clock. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Amy Slattery from our team. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Trisha. As Trisha mentioned, my name is Amy Slattery. I am the budget director for the Manhattan Borough President. And what we're going to be talking about today is kind of an overview of the city's budget. What we do from the office is very different. We have the charter has a formula for capital dollars that are allocated to borough presidents, and we do capital awards to nonprofit organizations, schools, parks, and other city agencies. And we do that generally between our budget process starts in January, and we make our awards kind of in two rounds. We do one in March and another one in May, but that's a very different process. And we're going to be doing our own info sessions, one for nonprofits on December 14th and one for schools on December 7th. So anyone's interested in getting links for those webinars, feel free to reach out to me or Trisha or Porfirio, and we can get you that information. But in the meantime, we're very lucky to be joined by IBO, which is the Independent Budget Office. And we have two people here today. We have Lisa and Sarita. Lisa's going to speak first. I'll throw it over to her in a second. And they can give you a little bit of an overview of what the IBO is and what their role is in this kind of entire budget process. Just a little bit of background about Lisa. She joined IBO in 2004 as general counsel, and in May of 2023, which is actually quite recent, she became IBO's first deputy director. And prior to all of that, she was legislative counsel at the New York City Council's Finance Division. The borough president was a council member prior to this, and I was on his staff at the city council as well. So we're really lucky to be joined by the experts here. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, and thank you once again. And we're going to do a Q&A at the end. So if you want to save your questions, you can put them in the Q&A section, and then one of us from the VP's office will be moderating that. So without further ado, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. And thank you to everybody who is here today. It's really gratifying as someone who's been at the IBO for a long time. Anytime we get to speak to a group of people that are interested in the budget and the budget process in New York, because that is, the reason we exist is to provide information to anybody who would like it. Just by way of introduction, I'm here today with Sarita Subramanian, who is one of IBO's senior research and strategy officers. Also on the screen somewhere is Louisa Chafee, who joined IBO as director in March of this year. So we're going through an exciting time of transition and sort of are, evolving our role as a provider of nonpartisan information. So I'm just going to go over sort of the order of my presentation. I'm going to begin with some general context and a broad overview of the city's budgeting process and walk through some of the major budget events that occur through the annual budget cycle. After that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Sarita so that she can introduce you to some of the city's major budget documents and provide some guidance about how to make some sense of those documents. And she's also going to speak briefly about how we at IBO access information in these documents to use in our own work, describing and hopefully illuminating what's actually happening in the city's budget. And then I'm going to close with some comments on the history of IBO and talk about the agency's role in providing independent analysis and on the city's budget, and touch on how that role has changed and grown and is continuing to evolve with new leadership currently as I speak. So to start with, I'm going to go to, Sarita is commander of, is driving, slide 3. So to begin with, I just want to remind everybody that the city's budget, like all government budgets and household budgets, any kind of budget, is really a statement of priorities. On an annual basis, the city government has to identify and estimate for the coming fiscal year what resources the city will have on hand in the form of city taxes paid or state and federal grants, and also identify how the city should prioritize and allocate those resources to provide for all government services that the city provides. So there are a couple of features that I want to focus on for a second of the city's budget that are not always found in other government budgets. And I just want to focus on those for a second. One is that the city is required by law to balance its budget in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. What that means is that at the beginning and end of any budget cycle, the revenues or resources the city has identified must be equal to the expenditures that the city is planning on making in the coming year and also at the fiscal year that is ending. In addition, the other sort of somewhat unique feature of the city's budget is that the mayor is required by law to develop and modify a 4-year financial plan. Both of these features, the balanced budget requirement and the 4-year planning requirement, came into being as a result of the city's fiscal crisis in the 1970s. They were requirements initially mandated by the state as it helped the city get back on financial footing. And those requirements were later and very recently added to the city's charter and now are a requirement of local law. So the addition to those requirements, the balanced budget and the 4-year financial planning process to the city's charter were in essence really a recognition that the construct for planning and administering the city's budget that had come out of the near bankruptcy in the city in the 70s had served the city really well and allowed the city to anticipate needs and shortfalls in resources well in advance of creating a current fiscal year crisis. So with all of that as context, I'm going to go to slide 4 and walk through a very high-level overview of a year in the life of the city's budget and talk about some of the major milestones, which are represented here in these circles, in that year. So the city's fiscal year begins, as many of you probably know, on July 1st. We are currently in city fiscal year 2024, which will end on June 30th of this year of 2024 and began on July 1 of 2023. After all these years in budget offices, I still find the 23-24, the sort of 2 years in one fiscal year confusing. So that's why I'm pointing that out. The adopted budget for this fiscal year was negotiated, as most budgets are, between the mayor and the city council after a series of city council hearings and negotiations between leadership on either side of City Hall. The budget process requires that the mayor update the budget for the current fiscal year to reflect changes in needs and resources on a quarterly basis, and that's what these 4 circles represent. These updates are typically accompanied by requests to the City Council to modify the current year budget to reflect the changes in revenues and expenses that are then available. The updates are also accompanied by an updated financial plan, taking those changes into consideration and reflecting them in the outer years of the 4-year plan. So to put this process in the here and now, as the yellow star on the slide indicates, we are anxiously awaiting the first update to the fiscal year 24 budget and the accompanying updated financial plan, which is due to arrive, drum roll please, on Thursday of this week. As with all major milestones in the annual budget process, IBO is required and will be providing an independent look at the mayor's updated plan. And if you get on our email list, you can look forward to having that report in your inbox. As indicated on the slide, the next major update is the release of the preliminary budget, which happens in January and brings the next fiscal year, so that would be fiscal 25, into balance. And again, the IBO produces a report that takes an independent look that views that budget through a independent lens. There are hearings that the City Council committees hold following the release of the preliminary budget in January. And then the third sort of leg of this journey is the executive budget release in late April. Again, that comes with an IBO report, and it reflects the most important thing about that update to the current budget and also the out years is it takes into account actions that the state has taken in its own budget. And then finally, we get to the adopted budget, the fourth leg of the whole thing, or maybe the first leg. And that's, that occurs after a series of hearings and oversight hearings that the council conducts. IBO testifies at those hearings, and then the council is responsible for voting on and adopting the budget. So I'm going to go to the next slide and talk a little bit about who is doing all this budget work. Primarily, it's the mayor's office and the city council who are responsible the mayor is responsible for developing the plans and overseeing agency spending, sort of administering the budget in addition to proposing the budget plans. The city council is responsible for oversight, for holding hearings, and for taking action on the proposed budget plans. The final budget, the final adopted budget for every year is almost always, in fact, at least in my time in city government, has always been a negotiated budget. There was one moment in time when that was not the case, but that's another presentation. And then, so in addition to the mayor and the city council, who really are the primarily responsible for the city's budget, there are multiple other participants, as you know, among them the community boards and borough presidents, the controller, the financial control board, which is an oversight entity that came out of the fiscal crisis of the 70s. And then us, IBO, we as I've mentioned, we produce reports at every in conjunction with every major budget action through the budget cycle. So in addition to the offices and elected officials that play a role in influencing the shape of the city's budget, there are also just multiple opportunities for multiple, for anyone really, any member of the public, any advocacy organization to provide comment and have some input into how the city's budget is shaped. Over the course of the year, the council holds oversight hearings and also holds hearings, as I mentioned, particularly focused on the preliminary budget and the executive budget. So that is sort of the very high level overview of the important moments in time in the annual budget cycle. And a little bit about the four-year financial planning process. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarita so that she can go into some more detail about how we use the budget documents that the mayor produces, that the mayor's Office of Management and Budget produces, and how you might access some of that information when you are advocating on behalf of your community boards and other organizations.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
Yeah, so as Lisa mentioned, there are these avenues for budget input, also interspersed in the financial plan cycle. In mid-February, community boards can send feedback on the budget, actually between mid-January and mid-February. And then early March, borough presidents send their proposals as well. So now let's get into, Okay, I'm going to talk specifically about the 2024 fiscal year budget. So, as Lisa mentioned, um, the city has to have both revenues and expenditures in balance and the fiscal year for which the budget is adopted. So this is for 2024. As you can see here in this table, it shows the major revenue sources. And as no surprise, taxes are a major source of the city's revenue. And even within taxes, property taxes account for about a third of the city's revenues. What you see in this line, other taxes, the second line includes income tax, sales tax, business, and other consumption and transfer taxes. I wanted to note, in addition to taxes, there are also miscellaneous revenues that can include fees and fines, licensing, so other revenues the city brings in. And then we also receive categorical grants, so state or federal grants as well. And so once you take all that into account, city funds as well as non-city funds, the total budget for 2023 was 111 billion, and then for 2024 was 107 billion. Now, taking a look at what the city used those revenues for, we can see the expenditures on this slide. So you'll notice that the expenditures for 2023 and 2024 matched the revenues from the previous slide. As Lisa mentioned, this is part of the requirement that the city must be in balance. You do notice that in the what we sometimes refer to as the out years, so 2025 through 2027, the city is not yet in balance, but will need to show a balanced budget for 2025 by January, the preliminary when the preliminary plan comes out. That is the first budget in which 2025 must also be in balance. So going back up to the top of this table, you could see that, fair amount of the city's revenues go towards paying for salaries and wages. So we call that personal services. So payments for city employees, payments for other benefits of city employees, such as pension and fringe benefits, includes healthcare costs. So all in all, total personal services are about 55 billion. And then anything else we call other than personal services. So this can include anything from things, papers, pencils that the city needs to buy. But it also can include contracts that the city has with external providers. So that would be, because those are not city personnel, they would be considered other than personal services. So you could see here this mentions a couple of items, medical assistance and public assistance, but the large bulk of it is all other personal services. So for those sorts of items that the city needs. In addition, the city, this presentation is really focused on the expense budget or what sometimes referred to as the operating budget. But there is a separate capital budget. And so those funds are not reflected here. However, what is reflected is the debt service on paying off the bonds that allow for capital expenditures. And so debt service, you can see here in this line, accounts for about over 7 billion. And then the next two lines are really critical pieces of actually they're a reflection of accounting practices and for example, if the city has, extra funds that it can spend in a year, it must spend those funds in that year. It cannot in essence, roll those funds forward. And so I think it's most clearly seen in the second line here of fiscal 2023 budget stabilization and discretionary transfers. So in this year, the city had extra funds for 2023, so extra revenues for 2023. And what the city does is that it prepays expenditures for the following fiscal year for 2024. So that's why you see expenditures decreasing in 2024, because those expenditures are paid for in 2023. So these tend to be known expenditures. So for example, prepaying debt service is something that the city does often. So similar to a mortgage, the city has a pretty good sense of how much it needs to spend for debt service. So that is an expense that they prepaid 2024 expenses in 2023. Now, a similar practice happened the previous year. So if there were a 2023 column here, you would see a similar positive expenditure of 6 billion for 22 that prepaid 2023 expenditures. So sort of a repetitive cycle in years when there is a surplus. There are a couple of other items here, but the last line, I did want to mention intra-city expenses. So a lot of times funds flow between city agencies. And so in order to not double count those, the city has to back out those expenditures that are passed between city agencies. So at the bottom, we get to total expenditures, as I mentioned, which are balanced for 2023 and 2024. And we do see these, oftentimes this is referred to as the gap sheet, you might hear. So the gap to be closed in 2025 is 5 billion, and that grows to 7.9 billion in 2027. So I'm going to take a deeper dive into fiscal 2024 now and cut expenditures a little bit differently to look at expenditures by the mayoral cabinet. So this is a way that is common. You might see this in the city comptroller's annual comprehensive financial plan, or in other mayoral publications where certain agencies are grouped together. But you can see that about a third of the city's funding goes towards education. Another, roughly 19 billion goes towards social services. 17 billion goes towards the miscellaneous budget. That includes healthcare costs for city employees. And then 10 billion each for public safety and judicial agencies, as well as pension costs. And then we have other cabinets further down here. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what are some key budget documents on the OMB website that we as IBO use. There are a lot on there, so I'm going to highlight a few of them for you. But if you do have questions about any other ones that you find on the OMB website, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer questions about what information you can find and where is the best place to look to find it. So I'm going to click on this to bring us to the OMB website and to look at the June adopted budget. So the first document here that we generally look at is the financial plan. So this provides a citywide summary of revenues and expenditures for the years included in the financial plan. So as Lisa mentioned, the city is required to adopt a current year budget, but then also include forward years for the financial plan. So this is actually where you found the information that I just showed you and what talked you through in the previous slides. So as I mentioned, high level look at revenues and expenditures. So that is where that came from.
Quick question, Sarita. I don't think it popped up, the website. So if you can try clicking on.
Didn't. Okay. Yep. Sorry. 1 second. Do you see it now?
No.
No, not yet.
Presentation.
Okay.
It worked before.
Yes, it did. Okay, let me try this.
There we go.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna, so yes, so if you click on, so this is the OMB website, and the first thing I clicked on was this financial plan. And there you see the tables that I just walked you through in the last few slides. So then going back, the next document is the, let me just, okay, is the financial plan expense. So this provides the total projected expenditures for the city and for each agency by fiscal year. And this is really helpful to know sort of the top line numbers for each agency and for the city. What's helpful about this document is that it gives you the top line total, but then it also breaks down expenditures in a couple of different ways. So it's helpful to see, first it shows you personal service costs, so costs for people, and then other than personal costs, which are sometimes referred to as OTPS. And then at the bottom, you can look at the total in terms of city funds, as well as state, federal, etc. And if you go to this table of contents, you can jump down to a particular agency if you're interested in, for example, City University. So you can look at what expenditures are planned for the City University of New York. And then the last document that I'm going to talk about is the financial plan reconciliation. And this provides high-level changes from the previous financial plan to the current financial plan. So this starts with the previous financial plan. So before the adopted budget, we had the executive budget. So it starts with the executive budget numbers and walks you through what changes have happened in order to get to the adopted budget numbers. And again, there is a table of contents where if you are interested in looking at a particular agency, you can look at the initiatives that are included for that agency. And so as I mentioned, everything that we've talked about so far is the expense budget. But I also know that community boards do a lot or propose a lot of projects for the capital budget. So there are a couple of capital budget trackers that we find really helpful. So actually first, there is also the city does produce a capital commitment plan, but the capital budget trackers that we find really helpful is one from the New York City Parks Department. So if you're interested in particular projects in areas, this is a really helpful tracker to use. And then I'm gonna go back to the presentation to the Department of City Planning also produces a capital planning tracker. And that this is also really helpful if you want to drill down to particular neighborhoods or projects that are going on. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa to finish up our presentation and talk a little bit more about the Independent Budget Office.
Thank you, Sarita.
Let me see.
That was great.
If I can... Sorry, let me just... I'm not able to, okay.
So yeah, I'm just gonna, what is IBO's role in all of this? This is a lot of information, and that's part of the reason IBO was created, because it is a huge budget. It's hard to understand. Back in 1989, when the city was going through some very substantial changes to its charter, to the governing document that describes and mandates how the city government functions, the IBO was created just for that purpose, to try to illuminate, to try to create some clarity around budget-related issues and documents and the city's fiscal condition as a whole, and also to act as a counterweight to the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget, which is part of the reason that for every mandated budget update that the mayor has to produce, we are required to produce our own sort of take on that proposal. We have evolved over the years and have started producing a variety of publications in a wider variety of formats than we used to, in an effort to create even more clarity around some of these complex budget issues. So we have done everything from YouTube videos that were designed to help parents with children in public schools understand the budgets of those schools, to really complex analysis of programs like the payroll protection plan that came out of the COVID funding from the federal government. We took a look at that and the impact of that program on the city's small businesses. So we really do a variety of analysis, and we try to be a resource for members of the public, for city council members, for community boards, for borough presidents, to answer questions small and large. We produce a guide to the budget, which is available on our website, and are here to answer any questions that you have to the extent that we can. So, in sort of recognition, I like to think in recognition of IBO being established as a voice of objective information, the state expanded our role vis-a-vis oversight of the Department of Education in 2009. So we now have responsibility for looking at that budget, which is the largest portion of the city's expense budget, goes towards the Department of Education. And we've had a couple of other little added responsibilities over the years. But I'm not seeing the presentation, sorry, Sarita, so I don't know. I'm off script again. Anyway, so we're here for you, I guess, is how I will sum it up. We have a website you can go to. You can find contact information for all of us there, and we're happy to take requests for research. We are really looking to serve you as community board members and also the general public, and as I said, all elected officials in any way that we can, and provide information and analysis as requested. So thank you. And yes, here are some of our, now I see the slide, and this is some of our brochures that are available. You can sign up for IBO updates. If you do that, you will get our November plan report. As I pitched before, we have fiscal data on dashboards. We have historical spending. If you really want to get into it, it goes way back, many decades of historical spending. We have budget options that are ways that we sort of come up with to think about either raising additional revenue for the city or cutting spending for the city. I should make it clear that we don't advocate for any particular program or proposal, but we do present the information and pros and cons in our budget options for the options that we present. And yeah, that's who we are. And we're happy to be here and talk to you about the budget in general and to answer any specific questions you have either now, if time allows, or, you know, we can certainly, you can reach out to us and we can connect.
Excellent. On that note, perfect timing, really fantastic. I look at budgets all the time. First of all, let me say thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sarita. I learned a lot today. And as I was just saying, I look at budgets all the time. And there are things I learned today that I didn't really know. So in the interest of that and some of the questions that came up, I'm going to read a couple of questions that came in. This first one is sort of a combined question. You talked about rollovers not being possible. However, it's sort of combination. Since rollovers are not possible, who makes the decisions as to what gets repaid or prepaid, I should say?
Yeah, so basically, you know, it's like I mentioned, they tend to be expenditures that the city has some certainty in knowing will happen. So that's why I gave the example of you know, sort of like a mortgage payment. It's sort of, you know, if there are bonds issued and there's a schedule for paying debt service for those bonds that are issued, it's a pretty sure expense that the city knows it will have to pay. And so if there are years, like I mentioned, where there is a surplus, that is a natural area where the city does make those prepayments for those sure expenditures. Yeah, go ahead.
No, if I could just add to that, it's partly because those expenses are known and the obligations already exist, that the generally accepted accounting principles allow the city to use current year revenue to prepay those expenses. So it's somewhat constrained by the GAAP accounting rules.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Sorry, Sarita, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I have another question. So with the current talk of deep budget cuts, how much of that factual information will be in the November report?
So there will be a PEG document, program to eliminate the gap, that will detail by agency what are the specific initiatives that the agency is taking to meet their PEG requirements. So that will be in its own separate document on the OMB website.
Okay.
And you should also be able to see that in the plan reconciliation document that I showed you. Those will also be reflected there.
Great. I believe you may have access to the chat. If you could put the website address in there, that would be fantastic.
The OMB website?
Yes, please.
Oh, yes.
And there was another question. What are the added responsibilities of the IBO that you alluded to, Lisa?
So in addition to the major added responsibility, which came as a result of the continuation of mayoral control of the city school system, in 2009, the state decided that, you know, that there ought to be more oversight of the school system if the mayor was going to continue to, you know, run and sort of oversee the school, be in control of the school system. So that was really the big moment. We got some additional funding to do that work. And in addition to that, we've been asked on occasion to do reports on what are known as tax expenditures. So tax programs, or usually they're economic development programs that forego some source of tax in order to encourage economic development. We've been asked to look at those programs to see if if the city's actually getting a bang for the buck, so to speak. So that's another sort of explicit added responsibility that we have in accordance with a local law that was passed a few years ago. That's work that we do in cooperation with the city council.
Excellent. There are several questions about contacting you or getting information or being able to see the charts or get the reports. I would urge you all to look at the chat. The website addresses are there. You can download those. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, that is possible, correct?
Yes.
Excellent.
You can go to www.ibo.nyc.gov. And that's our website is there. If all of our all of our analysts are listed there. Sarita's there, I'm there, Louise is there. So
here's one last great. There's one last question I would love to get in because I think this applies very much to what the community boards do. So what determines the degree of priority as it pertains to the agencies that will use these allocations? Very important question for community boards. In other words, budget priorities, how do you come up with them? Like, how are they determined?
Oh, you mean overall for the city?
Yes.
I mean, that's really the result of the work of the mayor and the council, ultimately the council being responsible for adopting the annual, budget. But, that comes out of a lot of hearings, a lot of advocacy organizations, lobbying City Hall. It comes out of information that is, from community boards, individual council members, hearing from their community boards. I mean, Sarita, I don't know if you want to add, it's really, sort of just a conglomeration of a lot of voices coming together and, and then going through the process of actually setting those priorities. Of course, no government ever has the resources to meet all of the priorities of every voice in, whatever constituency they're serving. So, hard choices have to be made.
Thank you so much. The other questions more or less have been answered. And again, I would urge you all to go on the website. I want to let everyone know who's watching right now. This has been recorded. It's going to be on the Manhattan Borough President's YouTube channel, so you can actually watch this again. Lisa, Sarita, Louisa, Amy, I cannot thank you so much for being here today. I don't know if Trisha wants to jump in, but we're so thrilled that you were able to join us today. And I want to give one final plug. Remember that on Friday, November 17th, we're doing our emergency preparedness training in combination with the state. There's a wonderful emergency bag giveaway at the end, and that's at John Jay College this Friday at 12 noon. Again, it's sort of like the end of the week series. We thank you all for being here. This was really wonderful. And again, I actually did learn several things today. Thank you very much. I don't know if you want to jump in, Trisha, or Amy, would you like to say anything to close us out?
No, I'm good. Other than just want to repeat the thank you to everybody for joining us, and thank you to IBO, and that's it. And feel free to reach out to us.
Okay. Trisha, anything or just wave? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your day, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully at one of the other training series this week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.